A lot of focus has been on the veterans when it comes to what went wrong last season for the Nashville Predators. Today, we'll look at how young players like Evangelista, Svechkov, and LaRue can contribute to a better result next season.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everyone. You who are familiar with this know it's the best day of the week. Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. We thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are, of course, your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are going to kick off this glorious Thursday episode the way we kick off all of our episodes, and that is shouting out our Locked On Predators insiders and our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio, and friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I am Emma Lingan, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
Well, Emma and I are working through our postseason assessments. We are outlining what we saw from the players on the Predators roster and talking about what we need to see from them moving forward if the Predators hope to turn things around next season. Today, we are going to talk about the season that was for a handful of the young players, and we're going to discuss how their vim, vigor, and vitality could be an antidote for what ails the Nashville Predators. Before we dive into all of that, do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, Emma, I'm so glad I got through that introduction because here's a little look behind the curtain at Oz. We had to redo it because I struggled with saying Svechkov. It was not good. It was not attractive. No, that was actually really good. And I always laugh because I said to Emma, I didn't even have my retainer in and I couldn't get it out.
You know, even on the best of days, Thursday, the absolute best of days, words can be hard, especially Russian words. So
yes. Fedor. We'll just call him Fedor.
Yeah.
From now on. But yeah, it was not a great start to the Thursday episode, but we're going to kill it from here on out, friends. Talking about the young players, and want to kick it off with kind of the elder statesman of the youngins, and that is Luke Evangelista, who is so hip and cool. He will forever probably be in my mind one of the young players on the Nashville Predators because he is an experience. This past season, played 68 games for the Predators, 10 goals, 22 assists, 32 points. So, Emma, looking back at the season that was for Vange, what did you think overall of his season? And is there anything in particular that stands out to you, good or bad, from this past season for Vange?
I think it was a little frustrating. I mean, frustrating could be used to describe just about everybody this year. But I think that, we saw he was one of the guys last year down the stretch and into the playoffs. You started to see him maybe not fully break out, but he was like, ooh, he's right on the verge of something. You could see him really getting a lot of confidence, and that was reflected in the way he was playing. He actually did really well in the playoffs, I thought, against Vancouver in that first round series. And so you left last year thinking, oh, like next year is going to be good. This is going to be a big year for Evangelista. And then that didn't really happen for a variety of reasons, one of which being he, was dealing with some injuries earlier in the year, missed some time. So that, of course, didn't do him any favors. But again, when he was in the lineup, it's the same old story. You see him buried in the bottom six with not very skilled line mates. And so it's kind of hard to see what you have in him when that's the role he's playing. And I think towards the end of the year, when we saw him elevated into a top 6 role, oh, look at that. He actually started showing up on the score sheet a lot more. Not so much with the goal scoring, but with the puck distributing. He was, he's just got such good hands. And I think that we got to see a little bit more of that again towards the end of the year. But now I am maybe more apprehensive looking ahead to next year. Well, first they got to get a contract done. Second,
Yes.
second, I think, it was kind of maybe have a little bit of like whiplash from the year before where it's like, well, we said this about him last time that he was knocking on the door of something, and then we get to the next season and it just doesn't happen. So I think, I would like to see him play with more skilled line mates. I really like him as a playmaker. I think he sees the game very well, and is very smart the way he thinks the game. So I think that that's something that kind of stood out to me from this past season when you look at like when he's in different roles with different line mates, you can kind of see where, the areas where he really excels.
I agree with what you just said. I think when we saw him play with elevated line mates, you saw more of what he is capable of. And he rises to the level of the players he is playing with. And I thought he did such a great job matching some of the veterans' performances when he had an opportunity to play with like Ryan O'Reilly or Philip Forsberg. He had, Michael Bunting, he had an opportunity to showcase what is there. Here is the thing that I always think about with Luke Evangelista is that I think sometimes numbers get to him. When he started in the OHL with the London Knights, this was a big ta-da. And in his first season, he played 27 games for them and he didn't get any goals. He had 2 points on the score sheet in those 27 games. But the next season, played 62 games, had 61 points. He's, performing at this almost point per game average, goes into the AHL, has a brief stint there, and then he jumps up into the NHL with Nashville. And I think he got off to a hot start in his inaugural season, but his starts have been a little slow. And I think that gets to Luke Evangelista. I think he is one of those players, and this is one of those things that I'm really looking for from him next season. I think he needs quick out of the gate because I think that weighs on him, and that's a part of his growth. And he talked about that some last season, like the mental aspect of this, like when I'm not on the score sheet, what am I doing? And so I'd love for that to not be a hitch in his giddy up early in the season. I want to see him hit the ice, get on the score sheet, and not have that take up mental space for him. And I think that's going to happen based on who he gets an opportunity to play with. Now, we got to see how this roster all shakes out in the offseason to see where Luke Evangelista falls. But I really agree with you. I want to see him play up. The other thing I will say, and bless his heart, he was one of the players at the top of my list of people I wanted to yell, shoot the puck at. And I don't have I don't have a stat to quantify that except for the gut feeling that I had frequently where I was like, shoot the puck. And, I understand it. We talk about Forsberg and Yossi and Ryan O'Reilly, learning not to defer to Stamkos and Marchessault. Imagine being one of these young players and saying, you know what I'm going to do instead of passing it to Steven Stamkos, I'm going to shoot the puck. Like that is a mind bend. So I understand it. But Luke Evangelista, shoot the puck, dear child.
Yeah, I think we saw it, and in fairness, he was not the only one that I saw this with, but he was one of the, I would say, the repeat offenders in terms of like he was trying to set up just the perfect shot, the angle had to be right, everything had to be perfect, and it's like, no, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. It can be ugly. It's fine.
Yes.
And so I think again that goes back to what I was saying about confidence and playing with confidence. And we, I think that he was lacking a lot of that, and that's what made him, of course, it's human. It's natural. You overthink things. It's like, well, I got to get this shot off just perfect. I need to be in the right position at the right angle, this and that. And it's like when you're not feeling confident because you haven't been on the score sheet or you don't feel like you've been contributing as much, you're not going to be as free and loose with the shots that you take. And that's, it's a vicious cycle, but I agree with you that it's going to be something that like we've seen it now for 3 seasons if you count his first season in the NHL, which was not a full season, but
Right.
I think over that time now you've seen flashes of it. You've seen flashes of what he can be if you put him in the right position, the right circumstances. So that's almost like more frustrating. It's like the State Farm commercial where he's like the guy's dangling the dollar bill on the 50.
Yes.
He's like, you gotta be quicker than that because he's like yanking it away. It's like that's how I feel. It's like, ooh, Luke Evangelista, and then he just gets yanked away, and it's like, ugh. So I agree. I would like to see him in a more elevated role to start the year. I think that again, got to get a contract done first. I see he's probably a bridge deal candidate. I don't really see why Nashville would sign him long term. And so I think that he would be a perfect candidate for that. Sign him for like 2 years, but then once you do that, put him in a position to succeed.
Come on.
And then if he doesn't succeed, that's when you move on. That's fine. But like you got to give him the chance first.
Absolutely. That's going to be huge, I think, for Evangelista. Coming up, what Luke Evangelista does next season could heal or hinder the Nashville Predators fan base psyche. We're going to explain why and talk about Fedor Svechkov coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and had a moment where you thought, where did all of my money go? Whether it is dining out, online shopping, or entertainment, it is so easy to lose track. But that is where Monarch Money comes in. It is your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money, it's not just another budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. So you stop managing your money and start building wealth. Monarch Money is a great tool for young adults just starting out on their own. It also makes financial collaboration so much easier. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page together without the added stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, Emma, talking about Luke Evangelista and was chatting with our insiders and asking them, which young player do you expect to see take a step forward? And across the board, the majority of the feedback was Luke Evangelista. And then one insider, I think, had such an interesting perspective where everybody needs to root for Luke Evangelista to bust through this season. They said, I hope that he won't be the next Tanner Jeannot, Cody Glass, Tommy Novak, who gets everyone excited and then is traded away. I feel like there is significance to Vange's development because our ability to develop homegrown offensive men is in question. And I thought, can you just imagine the emotional angst that would lift if Luke Evangelista busted out and we could say, oh, no, he can't, like we did that. Nashville did that all on their own. They didn't have to go out and get someone else to do it and then buy it. I think Evangelista having a breakout season would definitely help that kind of narrative that, like, what Nashville can do, develop goaltenders and defenders, but man, they cannot develop a forward to save their life. Go pressure, Luke.
I mean, yeah, it's the elephant in the room, right? You're seeing the same kind of pressure on guys like Zach LaRue and Fedor Svechkov and
it's a thing.
Joachim Kimmel. Like you're seeing a lot of that pressure manifest. I mean, because the guys you said, but add on, what'd you say? Janot, Glass, Tomasino, Parsonen, Novak, the list goes on, I think. And with each one, I think everyone gets a little more. Afanasiev, there's another one. I think people.
Emma.
I know. Remember him?
Ouch. Oh,
Remember
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Can't seem
So,
to forget.
yep. So I think that there's absolutely something to that, whether it is like purely psychological or not. I think that there's absolutely some realness to that. Evangelista is kind of the last man standing of that sort of group, that like era
Yes.
of forwards, because even guys like LaRue, Svechkov, Kimmel, they're sort of like the next wave. And Luke Evangelista is the last man standing from that first wave. And so you really, I think absolutely a lot of Predators fans really want to see him fully develop into that like star forward, because it would be vindicating for sure.
It would feel so great to see a homegrown Nashville drafted guy earn a spot and be successful in a top six role. Nashville needs that. They just need that. Another one that we're talking about, Fedor Svechkov, 52 games played, 8 goals, 17 points. He made his NHL debut on November 23rd in a win against the Winnipeg Jets. Oh, Fedor, how we teased you with what it felt like to be in the NHL and then unfurled the season that you stuck around for. Bless his heart. He scored his first NHL goal November 30th versus Minnesota. I had a chance to ask him, I was asking some of the players and got a chance to talk to Fedor Svechkov about what is your favorite hockey memory of your whole life. And he said, oh, my first NHL goal. Definitely my first NHL goal. And I thought, oh, bless you. When I look back at Fedor Svechkov, he is the player that I think has had the smoothest growth trajectory of a lot of the young players we've seen in recent seasons. Now, that's not to say that I'm like, he is a rock star and he is, top six line ready and immediately, but I feel like he had fewer bumps. And you could look at Fedor Svechkov in his maybe first 5, 10 games in the NHL, and then Fedor Svechkov at the end of the season. And there was such a marked difference in the way he played the game. And I think that was exciting. My question is, do we really have an idea of what his ceiling is yet? Like, have we seen enough to know what Svechkov can do long term for the Predators? And I think that's something we're gonna have to have a better answer for next season.
I think so too, primarily because I'll take a gander as to what his ceiling is, and I think that is as a 2C. That is his absolute ceiling. But I think as long as we don't know that, there's still like this little glimmer of hope that maybe he'll be that elite 1C, and it's like, I don't think he will be. And I don't mean that as a criticism of him at all. I just think that that's not what he's suited for. But yeah, I really, it's hard because like that's what I think his ceiling is, but I also don't want to assume that's what his ceiling is and then have him pigeonholed into that role.
Right.
But I don't know. I do like that he was getting top 6 minutes down the stretch, and I totally agree with you. I think that first mini stint in the NHL before he got sent back down and then came back, I think that first few games definitely humbled him. And he acknowledged that. He's like, yeah, that was, I wasn't fully ready for that.
Yeah.
And I think that this year, I mean, we were not supposed to see this much of Fedor Svechkov in the NHL
No.
this year. Like, not even close. So with that in mind, I think that he, what you want to see is that, like you said, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, he had improved. Now, was it all linear, like straight rocket to the top? Of course not.
No.
But I think that overall you saw improvement, and you were seeing fewer like true rookie mistakes from
Yeah.
him towards the end of the year. Not that there were none, but there were fewer.
Yeah. I really love too the difference in him in Milwaukee when he went back for the postseason in Milwaukee. He really was a different player at the AHL level, having spent this last stretch in the NHL, with the Predators before their season came to a just horrible halt. But I did love what we saw from him. The one thing I think everybody is cognizant of when you look at Fedor Svechkov is that sophomore slump. And I always go back to a conversation that we had with Mark Borvietsky talking about the sophomore slump. And he's really spent a lot of time, and they do this in player development. Kind of what is that about and how do you avoid it? And Boros said part of it is that the new has worn off. So you're not running on adrenaline. You've been here before. You're now, grinding out 82 games versus the 52 that he played in the NHL. You also are just under different expectations in your second season. You are expected in your second season to perform at the NHL level and to produce. I will say this, just straight vibes and personality. I'm hopeful that that won't be as big a hurdle for Svechkov, but I do think it's something that we need to be mindful of. This will only be his second season in the NHL, and that can be tricky.
Well, again, I think it goes back to the same thing we were talking about with Evangelista, is that pressure of like this young homegrown forward, can he? And I think that the leash and the patience level is, getting a lot
Yeah.
shorter among the fan base, especially because it's like, well, this is first round pick and he's a center. Come on, let's go. And it's like that realistically, he's not just going to immediately become a superstar. So I think that there's an element of that. There's also the element of the fact that last year was just so terrible in every
Right.
possible way that fans are going to be impatient, understandably so. So I hope that the fan base has that sort of level of patience and grace with Svechkov. What I will have less patience for, and I think fans will have less patience for, is if, next year comes around, let's say for the sake of this discussion, that the entire roster looks the same as it does right now. And Svechkov is buried on the third line again. And it's like,
Yeah.
and it's like, all right, what are we doing here? Now, if they go out and get another center, and like, a legit top line center, and then maybe you have Ryan O'Reilly and then Svechkov, that's a different story. But I think that for right now, there should be no one on this roster that is blocking his way of getting
Yeah.
second line minutes. Again, that could change depending on what happens this offseason. But for right now, it's like, just don't pigeonhole him into a role. I know I just got through saying he's a second line center, but I mean, let him prove that
Yeah.
first.
I love what you're saying. He needs to have an opportunity to move up. And what he does with that, okay, but he can't fall short because Nashville didn't give him the pathway. And I think people feel like that has happened for other forwards in this system. So that's something to be watching for Svechkov. Coming up, we're going to be talking about spicy Zach LaRue, and tell you the players that we hope to see in Nashville next season. All right, Emma, I love talking about Zach LaRue. I don't have favorites, but if I had an empty chair at the Thanksgiving table for American Thanksgiving, I would invite Zach LaRue. He's so delightful. Made his NHL debut. I will never forget this, October 22nd, the day my grandson was born. I missed his rookie lap, which I got to tell you, I was a little bummed about because I've really liked Zach LaRue for a long time, but had bigger and better things to do. 62 games played, 5 goals, 15 points. What I think is of note is that Zach LaRue was never sent back down to the AHL. I think part of that is how he performed. I think part of that is they were dropping like flies, Emma. I mean, they were dropping like flies. And so you had to have somebody here, but I think he did a really great job. And I don't think that there was a point in time where I was like, you know what, Zach LaRue needs to go back to the AHL and somebody else needs to come up. Like, I feel like he earned the time that he had in Nashville. So when you think back on this inaugural season for LaRue, what did you like best about him?
I think I like that, the moment didn't look too big for him. I think
Yeah.
that we saw a lot of, and I'm not at all trying to say that, like, I'm not trying to excuse any of his past antics or say that they don't count and, like that they're totally excusable. But obviously he had a bit of a checkered past coming up through juniors and then into the AHL, a lot of suspensions, a lot of, penalty minutes and the like, and that's all totally, it's real, it happened, it's there. But I think that him coming into the NHL, people were very concerned about that. um for the most part, I thought he handled it with a ton of poise and maturity. He did, of course, have the slew foot
Oh, yep.
against Jared Spurgeon, Minnesota, which again, everyone, that I was going to say that could be a whole other podcast. It was a whole other podcast. Go
Yeah.
back to what, December or whenever that happened.
Yeah.
Um and we had a whole episode about it. But I think that he, there was so much noise around that, so much like, oh, he had an
Oh
intent
my
to
goodness.
injure, blah
Yes.
blah blah. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It was a slew foot. He deserved to be punished. He was punished. He was suspended. And I think, and then there was the extra noise from
Oh yeah.
Minnesota when Foligno, couldn't think of the name for a second, comes out and said, well, like he's gonna have to pay or whatever, like saying stuff to the media.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was pretty sweet when Minnesota came to town and forgot they had a hockey game to play because they were
They were
so
calling the
focused.
drama cauldron and they forgot to put it down and pick up their sticks. It was a whole thing, you all.
Oh, they
Yeah.
brought the whole dang drama cauldron with them all the way from Minnesota, and they forgot to put it down. And so that was fun. I mean, there were not a lot of fun moments from this
No, they
season,
were not.
but that was
That
one of
was
the few.
one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, but even with that situation, I think that Zach LaRue handled that so well.
Hmm.
Just from talking to him, the maturity that he showed. I just, and he didn't try to say like, "Whoa, I didn't do anything wrong." He totally
Hmm.
owned
He
it.
just owned it.
He owned
He
it
owned
and
it.
said, "I need to do better. I will do better." And, that was that. So I think that that is, with that aspect of Zach LaRue probably being the thing that people were most concerned about. I think that he showed market improvement from juniors and AHL into the NHL. So that's something that I, personally was very impressed by.
Yeah, I agree with you so much because that really was the thing about Zach LaRue that people talked about. It wasn't his on ice skill set, it was his, checkered past, as you referred to it. And I do think he handled it with a lot of maturity. I had a chance to chat with him, which I, always enjoy doing, getting movie recommendations. I'm telling you, Reviews with LaRue is going to be the podcast I do someday. But
My favorite was the time that we were in the locker room and he came in like
aggressively,
he was walking with a purpose, like on a mission, just comes in and I don't know if he
it's
tapped
aggressive.
you. I don't know
He
if he
did.
tapped you on the shoulder, but he goes, "Hey." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And he's like, "I watched that movie you told me about." I was like, "Oh, okay." I thought I was gonna have to break up a fight between the two of you. Quite
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know who would win, but I
I'm
mean,
scrappy. I'm
I know,
scrappy and feral.
I know.
Like, I have a
Well,
checkered past too, Zach LaRue.
he doesn't have a black belt unless there's something I don't know about
We
him,
don't
but
know.
I
Yeah.
mean, just saying.
Yeah.
But
We did almost come to blows over Wicked. We did.
yes.
We really
Well,
did.
I love talking to him too because like he's very real and I hate it because I feel like the
Mhm.
NHL the NHL
Sucks it out of them.
is going to beat this out of him and I
Don't
hate
do
it.
it.
but
Yep.
he's so real with things and like the way he talks about things. And I won't say exactly what he told me, but like, remember when he got cross-checked in the face by Timo Meyer?
Oh, do I ever?
Yeah, and he had to wear the bubble for a little bit.
Hmm.
That was another great one-liner from him when he came in wearing the bubble and people are like, "Looking good." And he was like, "I hate it. This is why I didn't go to college." It was great.
About that.
Um, but anyway, I was talking to him afterwards about that, and it was such an honest, raw conversation about that because like when you talk to players about things like that, they're going to give you the scripted, PR
Yes.
friendly answer. But we just had like a good chat about it to the point where we finished talking and the Predators PR staff came over to me and said, "You weren't recording any of that, were you?" And I said, "No, this is just for me."
This is
Thanks.
just, and I love that about Zach LaRue. Like he is, and he's very funny and he's very personable. But the other thing about Zach LaRue is that he is very intelligent. Like he's very emotionally intelligent and unfiltered, and not in a crass, like flippant way. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting in talking to him is he was like, "This is the most pressure I have ever had. Nothing has come close to the amount of pressure I feel day in and day out, but I love it." And I hope that some of that pressure is diffused next season because he did have such a long stretch that maybe there some of that rolls off in his sophomore season and that works to his favor as opposed to how it often works against a player going into their second season. So for me, I really hope, and how I worry, Emma, about these young players being stressed out. So I really hope that he is going to come in with just fresh air and maybe less pressure, and that's going to work to his advantage. We, of course, saw a number of other players show up for the Nashville Predators, younger players, newer faces. Emma, which player debut did you enjoy the most? And which player debut made you go, okay, I see you?
Well, before I answer that question, I have one
Hmm.
more thing to add on to the Zach LaRue conversation because this is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. With
Hmm.
him, it came out when or sometime this week that he led all rookies in
Yes,
hits in the
saw that.
NHL. We're celebrating that. Wonderful. He can throw the body around. He's physical. He can knock guys off pucks. All good things. We love that.
Hmm.
However, I on one hand, I'm very glad to see that he, because he's a goal scorer. He was through juniors, through the AHL, and then a lot of times you see guys get to the NHL, and if they don't immediately start scoring goals, then they're just like, "What do I do?" And they just disappear. He did not disappear.
Hmm.
He really leaned into the physical aspect of his game because it's like, well, if I can't score goals, I'm at least going to impact the game in some way. And that
Yeah.
is by throwing my body around. And that's great. However, I
I,
look at like a Kiefer Sherwood as sort of a cautionary tale because Kiefer Sherwood, same kind of player. Very much a goal scorer through his young career. And then he gets to the NHL and it just wasn't happening for him. So he got kind of pigeonholed into that bottom six role, a role that he played very well because, again, he could lean into that physicality. He could be a pest. He gets under guys' skin. That's great that he has that versatility. Not all players have that. But then you see Kiefer Sherwood go to Vancouver. He starts seeing top 6 minutes. Look what happens. He almost
yes.
doubled his points total, his goal total in particular. And you can see that, you can be both. You can be a pest and you can score goals. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I hope that Nashville trusts Zach LaRue with that
Yes.
they allow him to explore all of the facets of his game and not just the one. um because
I agree with that.
I think that would also go a long way in maybe changing the narrative about Nashville's ability to develop forwards. Because it seems like Nashville's real good at developing like fourth line
But
forwards.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, great, cool, but like, can
There's
we
3 other lines. We got to
yeah.
fill out 3 other lines.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
that was just
Yes.
something that I
That
wanted
is
to
my
add on about
biggest
that.
fear with him. I will
Yeah.
say that is my biggest fear about Zachary Leroux. 100%.
Yep.
Better not happen, Emma and I. Mm-mm.
Well, okay, so debuts from this year.
Mhm.
There were so
Who
many.
did you enjoy the most, and who were you impressed with on ice the most? And they may be the same person. I don't know.
Um, Now I'm just honestly I'm going back thinking because there were quite a few.
Oh my gosh.
Um, I I enjoy Fedor Svechkov as a human because he's just delightful.
Yes.
Um, Also on the ice, I liked seeing his growth. I think his from beginning to end, you saw the most like visible growth with him. So
Mhm.
I liked that. I was impressed by Ozzy Weisblatt. I thought that he had a couple really good games. Now he is one who I do think his ceiling is probably as a bottom six forward, and that is okay
Okay. Yeah.
because if he is your bottom six forward, like you could certainly do a lot worse. I see him, I think that he played that role very, very well. Again, similar to LaRue, I thought that he looked ready for it.
Mhm.
So that was one. Adam Wilsby, of course, as
Oh,
advertised.
loved him.
Yeah, like all these guys, like they seem like they're ready. And I don't know, the one that I would say maybe surprised me and not in the good way was Joachim Kimmel.
Yes. That was
He
tough.
he didn't look quite ready.
Tough.
He wasn't ready yet.
Mm-mm.
Not saying he never will be, but I think that that was that was a little rough.
He had a lot of fits and starts in
Mm,
Milwaukee, and so I'm not surprised that that's how it goes, but I think people need to not take too much away from what we didn't see from him and
yeah.
write him off yet, but I agree with you. I think everybody was like, "Oh, oh," but there's more there. There's more there. I'm with you. Straight up enjoyment, just for a debut, Ozzy Weisblatt. Like, love his story. I love his tenacity. I love his work ethic. I love, just that zhuzh that he brings on the ice. He kind of plays with zero F's to give. Also, next season, gonna have another Weisblatt because, friends, let's talk about what's real here at Lockdown Predators. Mark Delgado is the patron saint, but you can never have too many Weisblatts. And Oasis is going to be joining Ozzy. He's going to be playing in Milwaukee. The one that I have to tell you, very eensy weensy sample size, but that I really went, okay. And our insiders, a lot of them said this too, was Matthew Wood.
Yeah.
Now, Matthew Wood looked like a deer in the headlights with a lot of things going on around him. Bless. I think he was terrified of the media. And I'm like, we are your friends.
He was like this close to calling me ma'am. I could tell. I'm like,
You could feel
don't
it
you
coming
dare.
off him. Don't check
Like,
yourself.
don't even.
Check. But
Uh,
yes, he has
yeah.
ma'am vibes. He
Yeah.
gives
Like
ma'am vibes.
very
Yeah.
much deer in the headlights. But I
Yeah.
agree. I think that again, teensy sample
The
size.
sample size.
You did see some growth from him in that small span. I will also going back to Kimmel for a second. I
Hmm.
will say the one thing that I did like about his debut and the fact that a lot of people saw it and went, "Oh, was that a large part of the very vocal fan base finally shut up about when are we going to see Joachim Kimmel in the NHL?" I was
Yeah.
like, they finally saw him. They realized, oh yeah, maybe he's actually not
Takes
ready.
time.
It's
Takes
like,
time. Well, and that was the name. That was, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to Joachim Kimmel, but that was the big name. And so that was who everybody who doesn't watch anything in Milwaukee was throwing out. Like, oh, well, this is the next guy. And it's like, this, friends, this is why you watch Milwaukee hockey. Also because it rhymes and you get to say Milwaukee hockey. But it also helps you. Yeah, so many debuts, so much potential, and I do think these young players have an opportunity to be big parts of potentially improving the Nashville Predators. I know the roster may not change dramatically, but you may get a little push and a little boost from these young players that could make a bit of a difference if we see some adjustments from the veterans as well. So they're going to be a key part of what happens next season, which, let's face it, crapshoot. Going to be really interesting to see what happens. This is like nailing jello to a wall when you talk about the Predators next season. We're going to do one more player evaluation episode tomorrow. We're going to be looking at the players that were, but then weren't. We're going to talk about the injuries, who we think is going to bounce back, and who is going to be an important part for the Predators moving forward. I think it's going to be interesting to see how much we see of players that we vaguely remember. Jeremy
Yeah.
Lazan, the name is familiar.
Rings a
Very
bell,
familiar.
maybe,
Rings a
but
bell. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Used to hang out with the Viscount Chihuahua, but I can't nail it down. Anyway, we've got a day to figure all that out. And
I'm sorry.
practicing Fedor Svechkov.
I've determined I'm gonna be less embarrassed by if I ever have to explain Mr. Potato Head to Colton Sissons than I will be if I have to explain Viscount Chihuahua to
Oh, that's
Alex
when we
Carrion.
quit. Like if we ever had to answer that question, Locked On Predators folds friends. That's what happened. He caught us.
Yeah, you
We had to
suddenly stopped
explain
hearing
it.
from us. That's it.
We
That's
got
what happened.
That's how it goes down, friends. That's how
Mhm.
this ship goes down.
Mhm.
Friends, that is going to do it for this Thursday episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. We thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are going to be back tomorrow talking about the players that we hope to see more from next season. We'll see you then.